Welcome to Pub Natter, where we record each episode in a different pub in Rutland, the smallest county in England. In each episode, your hosts, Tim and Justin, give a voice to the landlords and landladies and a special guest with a specific area of interest or expertise. We hope you enjoy our chats and it encourages you to go and explore our little county and all it has to offer. Like the motto says, there is much in little. In this episode, we are hosted by Karen MacGregor, who is the new landlady at the Noel in Whitwell, Rutland. We discuss the interesting village of Whitwell and how it became twinned with Paris, and Karen's big plans for the pub. Our special guest is Joe Davies, the head of reserve management for Leicester and Rutland Wildlife Trust. He is also responsible for discovering the Rutland Dragon. When rain stops play, it's time for some pub natter. So we're in the Knoll in Whitwell, and we're with the landlady, Karen MacGregor, and Justin, the co-presenter. And we're gonna, in a minute, be having a chat with Karen. We're sat at one of her tables, drinking some really nice ale, I've got to say. Kept really well, thank you.
Thank you.
And it's Rutland Osprey, and it's from the Grain Store Brewery, which is in Oakham, and it's a nice pint. As usual, Justin's been doing some Googling about the history of the Knoll, and so why don't you kick us off by telling us about the history?
Well, before we go into the pub, I just want to mention the village. If you drive into the village, and it really is blink and you miss it, but if you drive into the village, you'll see the sign saying Whitwell, and underneath is the legend twinned with Paris. I've been driving past that for 27 years, and it didn't really occur to me that that was odd.
I've been driving past it for a long time, and I always presumed it wasn't Paris, France.
No, it is Paris, France.
It was some small Paris somewhere.
Well, the twinning came about in 1980, and the idea for doing it formed one drunken evening in this very pub. And at the time, the village of Whitwell comprised 19 houses and 41 people. But it did have an outside toilet, which they knew, which was called the pissoir. And the regulars at the pub felt that this was enough Gallic heritage to justify twinning the town with Paris. So they did. So they wrote 3 times to the then mayor of Paris, somebody you may have heard of called Jacques Chirac, who went on to greater things. If being president of France is a great thing. And they wrote to him 3 times to offer Paris the honour of being twinned with Whitwell. And the first 2 letters were completely ignored, a Gallic shrug. And on the 3rd occasion, they set a deadline of 15 days to reply, after which silence would be deemed acceptance. So, unsurprisingly, no reply was forthcoming from Mr. Chirac. So on the 13th of June 1980, Paris was officially accorded the honour of being twinned with Whitwell in Rutland.
Do Paris know about this?
They
Can I interject?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure.
I find it incredible.
This was just a laugh that was dreamt up in this pub.
I find it incredible it's been twinned with Paris.
I know.
So, sorry.
Well, if you go to Paris, they don't have signs saying twinned with Whitwell. They have signs saying twinned with Rome. Because it is a slightly imbalanced relationship. Anyway, on the 13th of June, the good people of Whitwell decided that they were twinned with Paris, and Paris didn't object. And so, to mark the occasion, they held a parade. The only French representation they could find was a local French teacher who was the victim of a kind of consensual kidnap. They dragged him down here for this big parade, stuck a Napoleon hat on his head, and paraded him through the streets in an open-top Citroen.
No.
Are you making this up?
No, this is absolutely true. I read it on the BBC, so it must be true.
I'm learning.
So Citroen 2CV.
I think it was a de Cheval with a
soft top.
With the soft top, yes.
Wow.
So this poor French teacher was stuck in a Napoleon hat and dragged through the streets. Apparently hundreds of people attended. None of the locals knew who any of them were, but people got wind of it. And I guess in 1980 there wasn't much else to do. There was no Netflix, was there?
Good music, though.
They did have good music, but no iPods. So the event was formalised by the erection of a wooden sign at the entry points to the village, saying "Twinned with Paris," and there was a plaque put on the old pissoir, which we believe is still around today.
Yeah.
And our landlady has acquired it, and eventually Monsieur Chirac did get around to saying no.
No.
But by then it was too late, and Whitwell had its twin, and among other things added Bastille Day to its annual calendar of events. But for me, the most surprising thing about the whole affair is that Rutland County Council, who are not known for their sense of humour, actually joined in with this and provided the permanent metal signage that sits on the two entry points to the village. And so the twinning is announced to anybody that passes through the small but perfectly formed village of Whitwell.
My French history isn't that good. When did they storm the Bastille?
I want to say 1787, but I could be wrong.
I was thinking more of the date rather than the year.
Oh, 15th of July.
15th of July. Fantastic. So I reckon we should
This is the Brexiteer francophobe who knows more about France than you do.
I think we should take ourselves up here on the 15th of July.
I'm not sure they still celebrate it, but maybe our new landlady might be able to read.
Well, I wasn't here. Well, hold on a minute. I took over the 22nd of June. I don't remember anything of that celebration happening on the 15th of July.
Maybe we should start it.
Or restart it.
But I've got this vision in my head now, like Marseillaise, 15th of July. I think there's an opportunity there, Karen.
Well,
Massive opportunity.
well, if there was one before, I missed it because it didn't happen. But if there's an opportunity, and obviously we are, perhaps I should celebrate it this year.
Well, have a chat with some of your locals. I'm sure some of them were around in 1980 when it all got kicked off. Yeah. I have to say, for the record, that Paris does not consider itself twinned with Whitwell. It isn't an official twinning, but
no, it isn't.
There is signage,
but there's signage, and it's good enough for us.
And it's a brown plaque, which makes it a touristy.
Yes.
Thing.
Yeah.
Because it's a brown plaque.
It's official.
It's official.
So anyway, Karen, tell us how long have you been here yourself in Whitwell?
Took the lease over on the 22nd of June.
This year.
Took the keys. Well, it was a very happy day.
Mm.
But I used to come to Rutland quite a lot when my daughter was baby.
Oh, right. So are you from near this area?
No. But I used to bring my daughter here. We used to go to the Falconry Centre. We used to go to lots of places around here. Mm-hmm. And I'm not from here. I've travelled a lot. My dad was in the army. I wanted to live in the country.
Nice.
I want to bring this country pub back to life. And the reason why I wanted this pub, the reason why I'm here, is because it's beautiful area.
And I've got to say to listeners that the pub is stunning. It's gorgeous. And
I've tried to bring the outside in. You know, I've changed nothing structurally. Would never. It's beautiful. It's quirky.
So what's the response been?
Really good response. My vision for this place is to bring it back to its former, a different former glory.
Oh yeah.
So is food a big part of your offering?
Absolutely.
So the gastropub type.
It's not a gastropub. It's a dining room. This is a dining room. That's a bar area.
So what sort of food are you planning to do?
I work on a 4x4 menu, by 4, okay, including vegetarian, trying to get it back up to gluten-free and vegan, and use local meat suppliers. My beer comes from local suppliers.
Yeah.
My internet comes from local suppliers. When I moved here, I wanted to use everything local. So it's done on a every 2-day, 3-day kind of situation.
Cool. I think our listeners are going to love that, the fact that you're using everything locally.
And I use now chalkboards because When it's gone, it's gone.
So the Noel's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
But I hate that word, home cooked. I hate that word.
Yeah.
Because that could have been, that could be some old lady cooking your food and bringing it to you. So everything is cooked here. Fresh. Customers are always told it might take a bit longer because it's cooked fresh.
I think most people are prepared to wait for good food, aren't they?
Especially if they know before they come. I think if you know that you're going to have proper food that's cooked from fresh ingredients that will change from day to day, and will be cooked, they'll start to prepare it when you order it.
Yeah.
I think if people understand that, they'll appreciate it.
And
I just think that people need to know.
I always tell people that basically some foods are ready quicker. Probably the starters are quicker.
Yeah.
But if you say, for example, tonight, there's steak and ale pie. There is cod loin with chorizo. You know, mushroom risotto, which is for vegans. We've got tonight was a vegetarian Wellington, which comprises feta cheese, onions, mushrooms, peppers.
Nice.
But my plans for this place is to re-tarmac the road, put back sort of proper disabled parking, whatever you want to call it. There's a pathway here that leads up to the farm, which takes you round a walk. So is to clear that, put stones up, a clear walkway with ropes, lights. I want to bring back people walkers. I want to provide walkers with a place to be able to lock their bikes, bring the wellies, provide a linen service, good food, good hot cooked food. And I want to work with local people, the sailing club, the Osprey, the trout farm, all these people to offer discounts, packages, and work with the local people.
Kind of a taste of Rutland.
Yeah. And I want to make this more of a destination point. Yeah.
Karen,
Yes.
we wish you all the best for your future endeavours, and it's been a delight chatting with you.
Can I just add also, I have a jukebox that is from the 1940s.
Wow.
Which has got all the original mechanics in perfect working order.
Same music, 1940s music.
All up to 70s.
Wow.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And I want to make that into a bit of a social room. And I'm also going to be bringing back live music, quiz nights, pie nights, darts nights, billiards nights, all of it.
If you put a minibus on from Oakham...
Can I stop you there?
I think you might get a few takers.
So one of my things, my business plan was to provide a driving service.
That would be a great idea.
Because there are no Ubers here. There's no bus route other than the odd one. And I think a one by the council. I think that comes through once a week. And also the fact that the location, it has been so difficult to get staff here.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Is there a but coming?
No.
So that's something that you think you might be able to do?
Absolutely.
Because I think if your local audience don't buy into it, I think there are plenty of people in Oakham and probably Stamford who would enjoy coming to a place like this for an experience that's a little bit different.
Because I always find that when people come, well, which one of us is having a drink? You know?
Him. Always.
So it's always
That's
like
unfair.
So it's always like who's having a drink. So my plan was to provide that service, which is what I'm working towards.
Yeah, I mean that'll work really well for things like quiz nights. Yeah, I think you've spotted one of the major issues that prevents couples and friends going to pubs
Yeah.
that are out of their walking range.
Yeah.
And if you can provide that service, I think it will be huge. Well, I wish you all the best, and I'm sure Justin does as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you for coming here and talking to me.
Absolute pleasure. I know the listeners are going to love it. So, looking forward to seeing you again in the future and seeing how it's going.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're in the Noel in Whitwell. We are with Joe Davies, who is the head of Nature Reserve Management that covers all of Leicester Rutland Wildlife Trust reserves. He's on my right. On my left is my co-presenter, Justin Perry. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
So first of all, Joe, why don't you just kick off by telling us a little bit about your day job?
Yeah, so I'm a very lucky person. I basically do as a job one of my passions. So I work with people and wildlife. So I work for Leicester and Rutland Wildlife Trust. We have over 35 nature reserves,
Wow.
19,000 members, over 90,000 members now, and do work managing nature reserves and also engaging with people across all spectrums. So I've been working for this trust for over 11 years.
Wow.
Doing different jobs.
So give us an idea of what your typical day is at work.
Well, today, as an example, in the morning, a few emails, and then headed off to Holwell, which is just north of Melton, Mowbray, to help a colleague. We've got a tree planting project there where we're putting in 13,000 trees.
Wow.
So I went and gave her a hand, met with the volunteers. So there was 21 volunteers helping there, and we had baked potatoes, and we planted about 300 trees. And I gave her a hand bringing some kit back. But that's not always a typical day. Very often it might well be in front of a spreadsheet doing,
Sure.
the less boring element of the job. But it's really varied. It can just be whatever nature reserves throw up. So we've got wetlands, woodlands, grasslands, and they take an awful lot of management.
So who are you accountable to?
So I'm accountable to my chief exec, Matt Carter, and obviously we've got a board of trustees,
Right.
who we're accountable to above that. But yeah, it's a really great job. I'm really lucky. I've been working for the Wildlife Trusts for 23, 24 years. And what I really like about Wildlife Trust as a movement is that they're local. So, we as Leicester and Rutland Wildlife Trust are focusing on our counties. Previously, before that, I was working in Suffolk for the Suffolk Wildlife Trust, and we focused on Suffolk's wildlife rather than, sort of more national organisations
Right.
that have a more general focus as opposed to that local element, that localness that we have.
I guess the main topic today is going to be talking about biodiversity and how that applies prominently in Rutland.
Mm-hmm.
But before we try to condense that topic into 25 minutes or so, we need to address the Temnodontosaurus trigonodon in the room.
Wow. Well done, Justin. How many attempts was that?
Because, listeners, as well as the day job he's going to tell us all about, Joe is the man who discovered what has now become known as the Rutland sea dragon. And we can't have Joe with us and miss the opportunity to tell us a little bit about that. So the first question, which I'm sure you've answered 1,000 times,
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel when you realised what you'd found?
Yeah, I've obviously been asked it a few times, and I think to begin with, I didn't know what I'd found. So we were working on re-landscaping islands on the Rutland Water Nature Reserve, and we'd lowered the water levels down to get a big bulldozer to push the islands out to make them lower and flatter, so the birds would find it more attractive to roost on them and to use them to breed on, which that worked really well. And myself and colleague Paul Trevor were walking through the mud on this lagoon with thigh waders on and a laser level over our shoulders with a bulldozer working in the background. And I looked down and saw a series of ridges in the mud that looked organic. There's lots of old clay pipes, they're land drains, but this they look quite different. I've got a vertebrate, a replica, 3D replica here of it, and what was sticking out of the mud was the top of 16 of the vertebrae from this what turned out to be an ichthyosaur, and these little nodules are sticking out. And I'd worked in the Hebrides for the RSPB and found quite a few whale and dolphin vertebrae. Now, I didn't know it was a marine mammal. I wasn't sure if it was a mammoth or whatever it might be. So I took photos and sent them, rang up Rutland County Council, having asked some other people what they found when the lagoon was created, because that lagoon is only about 13 years old.
So when you say an island, is that close to the shore, or is it actually quite a long way into the water?
So on the nature reserve, we've got 8 lagoons, which are separate to the main water, which we hold water back in or pump water into to create ideal conditions for the wildlife there. Lots of edge, lots of islands. So this island had been this area had been landscaped not too long ago, and they'd taken the level of the ground down only by about 1.5 meters. So I was thinking, is it a mammoth or something? Not that ancient, not as old as this turned out to be. So I rang up Rutland County Council, which infamously got on in a lot of the press, and said, "Who do I speak to if I think I found a dinosaur?"
Sorry, I just love that finding a mammoth's a bit meh.
Yaddy.
Another mammoth.
Yeah. And they said, we don't have a dinosaur department, but we will get hold of somebody in the archaeological department. And so the next step was paleontologists coming out. And Dr. Mark Evans came out. Dr. Mark Evans came out and saw it. I'd sent the photos and was just like, I'm 99% sure that this is an ichthyosaur. But what we didn't know is whether it was just a few bones sticking out, or whether it was more complete. So we did they did an exploratory dig. They dug all the way back to the tail, and they were amazed to find that it was that was all complete. But we didn't know what was going to happen at the head end. But we're in the middle of COVID. So it was quite difficult to get together in groups, and you kind of forget now, really, don't you, that you weren't allowed in more than 2 or 3 people together. So we waited for the breeding season to go by, and they came back in the summer and dug the rest of and excavated the rest of the find. And to our astonishment, the head was there. Some of the flippers were there, looking virtually complete.
Cool.
And this creature was 10.5 meters long. So everything's measured in double-decker buses, and this was the old classic double-decker bus size. And through looking at the other species around it, the tiny creatures, mollusk-like creatures, they've dated it to 181.5 million years old.
Wow.
So end of the Jurassic.
Yeah, Jurassic period. So one of the facts I really like, I do a talk on this quite regularly for evening groups and the like, but the last T-Rex was about 17 million years ago, roughly. This was 181 million years, so we're closer to the T-Rex in timeline than this, than that T-Rex was with this.
So
and how big was the head? We're sitting at a table for 8 people.
Yeah, it's about my height, so about 1.8 meters.
So probably
long.
3.
Yeah, 3 people sitting aside of each other. So
wow.
yeah, I mean,
just for our listeners, the vertebrae, I would say, is about the size of a standard big ashtray.
Yeah. In fact, if you
compare that to a human's vertebrae,
if you turn it on its side,
it actually looks a bit like one as well.
Looks like one too.
And for anybody under 50 who can't remember what an ashtray looks like, when was the last time you had an ashtray in your house?
I've never smoked.
Yeah.
Thank God.
And then this turned out to be a Temnodonts. Well, they're pretty sure it's a Temnodontosaurus trigonodon, as you
Nearly said.
So so well said.
He was practicing all day.
And that's the nearest one before was found in Germany. So it's a new species for the UK, and also the biggest complete fossil ever found in the UK as well.
Which doesn't really make any sense anyway, because everything was completely different during that time. UK, Germany.
Yeah,
They
it was
didn't
all.
exist.
Yeah, absolutely. We were somewhere around about the Mediterranean
Yeah.
at that point, latitude-wise.
Yes, but it's a good British dinosaur.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have found it if we hadn't gone for Brexit.
I wondered how long it would take before we managed to get Brexit into the conversation.
That's the first time I've mentioned it in 3 episodes.
Oh,
So,
dear.
a couple of things. One, well, 3 actually, then I come to mind. Is it possible that had you not recognised what it was, that it had been somebody else there, that it could have been damaged or destroyed or just missed? Was it fortunate that it was somebody who knew what they were looking at?
Yeah, I think so. I think the set of circumstances that we had the water levels low in the winter. We don't usually. We usually have the lower water levels in the summer. Over time, it would have degraded, frost action and erosion. And then, an interested, naturalist. I've been passionate about this since as a child. To sort of go, hang on a minute, what's that inquiring mind? So, yeah, set of circumstances, but incredibly lucky set of circumstances.
And I think you've explained why it wasn't, because it's quite close to the shoreline, I believe, where you found it.
Yeah, well, in the lagoon, so on the shoreline of the lagoon.
So 'cause, it's hard to understand how it was missed when they built the reservoir, but I guess if you've moved a couple of metres of soil, it could easily have been missed.
Yeah, so when the original reservoir was built, this is about 400 metres away from the original reservoir. So this is a new lagoon created. And it was created as compensatory habitat for when they bring the water levels down on the main reservoir. It makes the triple SI, so the Site of Special Scientific Interest, and the Ramsar smaller. So if they're going to bring the water levels down, the birds need to go somewhere else, and they created these lagoons for those birds to go there when they drop it down.
Final one for you on this, and I'm mildly fascinated because I was in piling and foundations, so excavation in clay is something that I'm quite used to.
Yeah.
My understanding is that they actually lifted not just the skeleton, but the body of clay that it was encased in.
Yeah.
They managed to cut the whole lot out and bring it up as one. How did they do that? That was
Well, in sections. So I can't remember how many sections it was now, but the head was one, then the torso, and then the tail in sections, and then the flippers. So what they did is they dug around it and they dug underneath it, leaving plinths there underneath, and then created a framework around it and covered it in plaster, like you would if you broke your leg. And then we got strops underneath it and diggers, tractors, excavators, and we literally lifted to sort of break that plinth that was left there, these little sort of towers of mud underneath, and popped it and took it away. And that's the funding is there to do the next step really for us through the Levelling Up Fund. So next year in 2024 will be the paleontologists will be cleaning it up and studying it, finding out what it, maybe we'll find out what it ate. There might be some food in its stomach. It may be, if it was female, maybe it was pregnant when it died.
Okay.
There might be tooth marks if it was predated.
It would be completely released from the clay, will it, eventually?
Yeah.
And displayed like the ones we see in the Natural History Museum, held together with wires and things.
Yeah, there's most likely to be a replica, because that might well be, the quality of the 3D printing that they can do. But
You need a pretty big printer.
You would. I know, maybe in sections. But yeah, we very much hope, well, the plan is for it to come back to Rutland and be displayed at Rutland Water.
Fantastic.
I'll touch on the moment that gave you your 15 minutes, but
Yeah.
the main purpose of today is to talk about biodiversity in general, and more specifically in connection with Rutland and locally. So, Tim.
So cool. So why don't we kick off with a really easy question for the listeners? So what is biodiversity and why does it matter?
Well, yeah, biodiversity is the wildlife and the world we live in, really, in all of its diverse states, really. So before humans were here, we lived in the world as an incredibly biodiverse, habitat in its different variations. We would have probably been a mixture of, small meadows and woodlands and scrublands that was being managed by large herbivores with carnivores predating on them, moving them around. And obviously humans have completely changed that landscape. So why does it matter? I think it matters because, well, personally, I value wildlife and I find great pleasure from observing and being in seeing wildlife. It makes me feel, happy and content. And I think it's great for people's mental health.
Sure.
Living in a biodiverse world, but also it's there's so many facets to it. Like you say, it's a huge subject, but trees produce oxygen for us.
Sure.
And they keep us cool. Different trees support different types of life, different insects.
Sure.
So if we're going to have a diverse, if we're going to have that diversity and all those different species, then we need to make sure that we've got that. We try and keep those different species of tree in the landscape and try and have sort of natural systems as possible to achieve that.
Sure.
So there's an aesthetic aspect to it. Is there an objective aspect to it where, as Tim was saying, if you lose species or a group of species, that then has a kind of knock-on effect to, because those species are needed to support something else. You lose one type of tree or one type of fern or something, and as a consequence, something else doesn't grow, which in turn means that something doesn't feed on it, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, that whole ecosystem, that whole circle of life, take an oak tree, for example, there's hundreds and hundreds of different species that are reliant on that.
I've got a massive one in my garden.
Yeah, which is great because especially those more mature oak trees, as they're decaying, they're producing dead wood, which is great for beetles. The insects that are on that are creating food for bats and birds. Plus the oxygen for us.
I'm a bit of a secret mushroom hunter, and they are the number one tree for mushrooms.
Yeah. So each of those different species of tree, or be it a grass or a sedge, or there's some along those lines, we'll have a group of species that are reliant on it, and those species are interreliant. So without those insects, we don't have swallows.
Sure.
Without swallows, we don't have hobbies feeding on them, which are an amazing falcon that comes in from Africa every year, and it literally follows the swallows from south to north and back again. And those swallows are feeding on, it's simplifying it, but feeding on mosquitoes that are wanting to feed on us. And so there's an impact on us as humans, not just the sort of the enjoyment element, but we are part of
Sure.
the biodiversity of our counties.
We always tend to look at it from the perspective of human beings, don't we?
Yeah.
There is a conceit, actually, that with all of the things about climate change and what we need to do about it, it's all built around the conceit that the human race needs to survive. Whereas
That's
I think Mother Earth would barely notice if we disappeared in the geological time.
Yeah, those of us who have children want the world to be in the right state for humanity to continue, and our children to have an enjoyable and a life where they can see a future for our planet. And I think biodiversity is key to that in climate change control as we go forward. We know that, for example, trees fix carbon, and they're maybe not the total answer. We don't think we can go on long haul flights if we've planted a couple of trees. But if we start to moderate and also realise that biodiversity and Mother Nature can really help us to sort of combat that, then we can hopefully moderate what we do, and Mother Nature will help to moderate the effects in the future.
There are a lot of very simplistic answers, and I don't think it's a simplistic subject. As you've said, it's everything. There are unintended consequences of everything you do.
Yeah.
You're going to talk in a moment about the changing of species from south to north. There's migration of certain things that 20, 30 years ago you would never find north of Watford Gap, and now they're creeping up into the Midlands and beyond.
Yeah.
In fact, is there anything along that line that a good example of that you can think of?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, we've seen massive species change in the counties, particularly the more transient species. So birds are a really obvious one from that perspective, because obviously they can fly, so they can make those movements really quickly. And I mean, we've had this year what's happened in southern Spain. With the really hot temperatures they're having, and also with the sheer amount of water that's taken out of the rivers for fruit and vegetable production, they've seen a really drastic impact on the wetlands around Doñana, so Seville area, to the point at which there was just virtually no water. So we had birds coming up, almost immediately and trying to breed in Leicestershire. So species that you'd never, people would have driven hours to go and see, were knocking around, in sort of on the Soar Valley.
Wow.
So night herons and then, for example, great white egrets, which were 10 years ago, we didn't have great white egrets at Rutland Water. We're seeing 50 great white egrets now. So that's within a decade of change. I think that birds are a really good indicator of that, because they can be so transient. Those species that are going to either have to, like a tree or a plant species that they can't make those jumps very quickly unless we help them.
A couple of meters a year, I should imagine.
Well, exactly. They're the ones that are really going to struggle, and also with vertebrates and the like, those that can't fly. That are really going to struggle with extreme climate implications of our that we're seeing through global warming. So the birds have moved from Seville area up to us for the summer, but what happened to the invertebrates? The long-term effects.
But the birds haven't moved because it's got warmer here. They've moved because the place they normally go is no longer available.
Yeah, but interestingly, we are warm enough for them to.
As well,
to have a go at, to try it, to attempt to breed. If it was a classic 1970s 20 degrees summer, of a child of the 70s, then they might not tried it. But what temperature did we see? We probably saw, mid to late 20s this summer.
Well,
the summer
I think we had
40.
the lowest temperatures in July that we've had for years. But that's the difference between weather and climate.
But
Yes.
Wasn't it the hottest year for ages anyway, regardless of that?
in the world, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. What stops a forest from completely taking over a country, or why do you get these patches of meadow grass or whatever?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, large herbivores. So if you look in Africa, for example, the elephants are literally pushing the trees over. So they're maintaining open savanna conditions. So and we would have had mammoths. We would have had very large cows in Europe, and those large herbivores impact it. But also it's soil types as well. If you've got really thin soils, the trees will probably struggle to set proper roots down, and you get a storm and they might get blown over, and then those areas get grazed. So there's no saplings coming up. So those areas are maintained as an open habitat. So we know that because we can see the species like nightingales, for example, which are a small warbler that flies up from Africa, a beautiful song that nests in scrubby areas. So that through the millennia has evolved to live in scrubby conditions. So those woodlands must have had scrub in them for nightingales to have evolved. So and other birds that like open areas, our classic farmland birds. Where were they before the farm? Where were lapwings? They were in open areas on estuaries and areas that were grazed by large herbivores. So there was a natural system there creating this, the diversity of habitats. And also rivers flooding, and opening big areas out, big areas of gravel.
Are there any key species that are under threat at the moment that would be a really good idea to save because they are one of the species that affect loads of other things?
I mean, I would love to see wild release of beavers, for example. There's an awful lot of projects in the UK. They are wild in some areas of the UK, but they're called keystone species. So these are these species that if they're let to just do what they want to do, if you look at a map, some brilliant maps, some really good work by the Devon Wildlife Trust actually, on what the areas that beavers have created from a habitat perspective by putting a dam in, and it's creating hectares of wetlands, which dragonflies enjoy. Maybe it's the reedy corner where you've got reed warblers in, and they're cutting the trees and creating scrub as well. So willow warblers are in those areas, and the fish are in there because they've created pools which. If it's just a fast-flowing stream, you've got a different species of fish that start to use it. So those keystone species can create an entire ecosystem and habitat.
Sure.
So
and they are natural to UK as well, aren't they?
Because
they've introduced them in Norfolk.
Yeah, but they're introducing them into caged areas, fenced areas, and I think if we want them to be landscape engineers and to create these amazing areas for wildlife, then I think that we need to do wild releases of those species. So anything that's keystone species, like a beaver, I'd say, let's do it.
And what is the perceived downside of allowing them wild? Do they destroy farmland, for example, by their activities?
That's often the issue, and the Devon Wildlife Trust done a lot of studies on that. If they've created a dam next to a low-lying arable field, then it can impact that that productivity from the fields. In an ideal world, the government have put money into into lots of different environmental projects. There may be these areas which are really suitable to being re-wetted, and we're in a climate crisis and we're in a biodiversity crisis. Maybe they're the areas we should concentrate on funding. Say, well, okay, if you've lost this habitat, if lost this productive area, then you should be compensated rather than leaving a field strip, that's not got arable farming going on it. That's simplistic, I know, and obviously, farms may well have been farmed for generations in a particular way. So it's emotive, and it's not an easy one to say, here's a magic wand, beavers are the answer to all our prayers. But I think that hopefully we as a nation are realising that we do need to do more. We're one of the most nature deprived countries in the world, and we're the sixth richest.
Yeah,
are we getting rich because of that? But surely we have the ability and the mindset and the funding to be able to reverse that and to really show and showcase sort of really productive. Forward-thinking conservation work.
So, taking it back, what can your average Joe do to make a difference and help?
Yeah, I mean, I think that those who were fortunate to have take it back to the bare bones of if you've got a garden, you can do something for wildlife.
Keep the grass.
Yeah, don't mow the grass. Certainly, err away from getting, plastic grass.
Concrete.
Nobody saw hedgehogs, munching away on werbs on a plastic grass in your garden. A tiny pond in your garden. It was Barbara Young who I think she ended up in Natural England, but what about RSPB? She said, conservation is easy, you just add water. And I think that Rutland water is a massive, is something really obvious to show. We've got 25,000 wildfowl at Rutland Water in the winter at times. When the reservoir wasn't there, that wasn't there. And you can see, you're obviously not going to get 25,000 birds in your garden, but if you put in a small pond, you'll probably increase the biodiversity in your garden by 3 or 4 times. Because you may well get, newts, or you may well get, diving beetles can fly and they come into that pond. So you'll have a variety of invertebrates just coming into that pond, and different species. Somewhere for the hedgehogs can go and have a drink. I know it sounds really simple, but yeah, leaving some rough areas, leaving a few logs, not mowing a bit of a part of your lawn for invertebrates to go and feed in and enjoy. It's all within our capability and grasp, and it's not a difficult thing to do. Bird boxes. I'd love to see, and it's starting to happen. But in new builds, swift bricks put into new build houses. For swifts to be able to utilise. They're not expensive things to do when you're talking about creating new housing, but it is definitely within our capability to improve the land around us, be it our homes and areas, for wildlife by doing some simple small steps.
So something like No Mow May, which is becoming a bit of a thing.
Yes.
Does that work if you just leave it for a month, or do you have to say, I'm going to set aside this part of my garden and that's just wildflowers?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably try and wait until the middle of July before I mowed. So No Mow May is a really good start because, all those flowers that come up, be they dandelions or daisies, whatever in that garden, are creating nectar for invertebrates. And that nectar is a food source that they wouldn't have otherwise. So, you're already increasing the biodiversity in your garden by creating a small area of nectar, and that long grass they may well be able to breed in. So yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant suggestion, No Mow May, but if you can leave it until later in the summer, all the better.
Sure.
And bee-friendly flowers, big thing.
Yeah. I mean, buddleia in your garden, amazing for nectar source. So yeah, and get these little bee bombs, don't you? You can put in, and they've got lots of different species that bees like, and other invertebrates as well. So yeah, that's a definite way to increase the food sources and available places for invertebrates, which are key element to biodiversity.
So people who they're looking after their gardens, they're doing all the stuff you want to do, and they're not conservationists. They haven't got qualifications in the subject, but they want to come and help and volunteer. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, we've got I'd say 36 nature reserves across the counties, and we're really fortunate to have amazing volunteers. What do they call it? The Green Gym. At times, so it's hard work.
So what sort of things do you get people to do?
Well, today we were planting trees.
Right,
That's not always the case. Very often we might be, it might be a really important area of limestone grassland, so we might actually, be doing some sort of control of hawthorns and the like. But cutting the grass at the end of the season, building bird hides, putting up, barn owl boxes. Fixing tracks. So anything you'd expect on a nature reserve, or we have species monitoring volunteers as well. So people who come out and help us monitor the wildlife to see, how it's doing. Because unless we really know and understand what's using our nature reserves and whether we're doing the right thing and making the right decisions, we don't know whether we're doing it right or whether we're blindly going the wrong direction.
So on the off chance that one or both of our listeners decides that they would like to get involved, how do they do it? Is there a website that they can contact?
So if you go on the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust website, there's a volunteering page, and there's an email contact, and you contact
and the website
our volunteer coordinator. lrwt.lrwt.org.uk probably. Okay. I'll have to double check that.
I'll put a link on our webpage for that.
Excellent.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Anything else you'd like to say to our listeners?
David Attenborough said that for you to appreciate wildlife, you have to have experienced it. So I'd say get out there, enjoy your garden, enjoy the bees and the butterflies in the summer. Even on a winter's day, you've got now you've sort of got winter thrushes flying over and maybe a starling murmuration nearby. So winter wildlife is amazing. Come down to one of our nature reserves and enjoy it. And hopefully get an appreciation of wildlife, because I personally think that it makes me a lot happier as a person. I'm genuinely not saying that. This week, for example, at Rutland Water, people have seen otters like three or four times, and when people see otters, they are elated. Just this playful, amazing mammal swimming around, splashing about. It's a moment of a lifetime for a lot of people.
Sure, yeah.
But I think that the majority of people, when they see something like that, they literally remember it for their whole lives. Yeah. And I think that obviously you can join the Wildlife Trust and be a member, but just going out and appreciating it is a key element. And then if you feel able or want to get involved, then obviously do some proactive conservation work, or do some proactive work at home, become a member. There's lots of different organisations that help wildlife, but I think if without our appreciation, without us making that connection, then if we don't value it, then I think it would just be a catastrophe for the human race. It sounds extreme, doesn't it? But I genuinely think it's the case.
On that happy note.
Well, the happy note is that it's not too late, and we can help, all of us, in some small way. So that's good to know, I think.
Yeah, well said. So thank you very much, Joe, for your time
Pleasure.
today.
Thanks for having me.
Really interesting.
Nice to meet you both.
Yeah.
You.
You will not want to miss our next podcast, which comes from the award-winning Olive Branch in Clipsham, Rutland. We chat with the successful owner, Ben Jones, and our very special guest is Alicia Cairns, Member of Parliament for Melton and Rutland. When rain stops play, it's time for some pub natter. So that's a wrap, and thank you for listening to our latest pub natter. If you visit timothyives.com/pub natter, you will find photos, links, and more information about each episode. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and please subscribe to ensure you don't miss a pub or one of our amazing guests. The Pub Natter theme tune is by Tom Arnold. That was a Pub Natter broadcast.